The end of The Batman set up many different options for director Matt Reeves to continue his version of Gotham on the big screen. Based on the inspired comics and villains of the first film, how could this develop in a Batman sequel? In this video, I'm going to be discussing what could happen in The Batman 2 following the ending of Matt Reeves' first film of a potential trilogy, looking at some of the characters, storylines, and other elements that might be considered. This video will contain spoilers from The Batman, so if you haven't seen the film yet, I would highly recommend watching this video after you've seen it. But if you want to keep up to date on any of my content surrounding The Batman, its potential sequels, and the HBO Max spin-off shows, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's dive into some of the potential things that could be seen in a Batman sequel. So while Matt Reeves' epic detective Batman film tied up a lot of loose ends, acting as its own piece of storytelling, it did end with a few teases that will most likely lead into the next Batman film, and I'm not gonna lie, after watching The Batman 4 times already, I'm really looking forward to seeing what Reeves and Pattinson do with the central character come the sequel. We of course end The Batman with Riddler meeting a new friend in the Joker at Arkham State Hospital, Gotham City being flooded, yet up for the taking and potentially open to be consumed by the rogues gallery that reside at the hospital or within the city itself. Yet with this going on, it's also a motivator for Batman to become that beacon of hope that he now strives to be. Hope will have to overcome the immense amount of darkness on the way, as The Batman Part 2, which might even be the title, could be one of the biggest challenges for our Caped Crusader in physical and mental ways that he hasn't dealt with before. The Batman began to go into the history of the Waynes in ways that we hadn't expected, and with Matt Reeves giving us a version of the Waynes that is not all good, it leaves the door open for that to go even further. And not to mention that alliance with the Arkham family which was formed, allowing the next films to explore the foundations of the city even more so, and what that means for right now. So let's discuss what routes the filmmaker could take, whether it be villains-inspired storylines, or both in the continuation of this live-action take on Gotham City. Starting with a villain that has been on the minds of fans for quite a while now, it's no secret that the easiest way to explore the foundations of Gotham more deeply would be by introducing the Court of Owls. With Gotham primed for a takeover, the Court of Owls would be the strongest mental test yet for the Dark Knight, and we could potentially see all of the brutality in a storyline that revolves around Batman's fights for survival in an underground maze. And while the filmmaker would have to change elements of this story, like the Arkham family for instance, the filmmaker has proven in the first film that he can smoothly introduce all different storylines and comic influences in fitting ways. Just look how in this film he balanced a Zodiac-inspired Riddler in a story that combines elements of the comics Year One, The Long Halloween, and Ego. So it wouldn't be out of the possibility to bring in the Court of Owls into this world as the next central villains, especially as it would fit the detective tone, and because in the first film we may have had a tease of them already. While this may just be a nod, the first card Batman opens at the crime scene of the dead mayor includes an owl on the front with a cryptic riddle too, and this could be just planting the seed for that down the line. Now, I think they are a big possibility, but I see them being more of a final film villain if we did get a whole trilogy, because for one, it would lead to reveals that potentially are the biggest of the whole story. And with the Court of Owls toying with the Dark Knight in multiple ways, other villains could also be connected to that, and make for a conclusion of events with them that we are not ready for. The Court of Owls are known as a secret society linked to Gotham City's most wealthy individuals who kidnap child performers from the circus, and these children ultimately grow up to be the dangerous assassins known as Talons. So right there, Batman has a brutal reason to go after them, and maybe this could also link into Robin and the Joker in a final film, and that brutal storyline that we all know of. But the Owls storyline introduced a secret history for the city, one with supernatural assassins working through an Illuminati-esque foundation that had secretly been manipulating Gotham for many years. It does go deeper as Bruce and Grayson's family work out a connection to them, and it would only link into some of the things we may have seen in Matt Reeves' first film. We got brief information surrounding the Wayne family history, including Martha's time in an institution, and not knowing fully who killed the Waynes, so this could be the first of many secrets to be revealed. Maybe it could be done in a Court of Owls storyline, but then again, the question would be, how would the supernatural elements fit into this world? Well, I guess we did see a potential nod to Bane's Green Venom at the end of The Batman, so if that is what we think it is, then maybe we could still end a new trilogy with something like The Court of Owls. We'll have to see, but I do think they are a big villain candidate come future entries. Moving on, something that has already been spoken about by many fans online, and is something that could hugely tie into the end of the first film, would be a winter-themed sequel with a potential villain and new Batman tech. The first film was very inspired by the Long Halloween, and it would make sense for a second film to go into a winter setting, following the flooding of Gotham, and giving us a new villain who director Matt Reeves would really like to see done well in the future. The filmmaker said a few weeks back that he would love to tackle an emotional and grounded Mr. Freeze, and the upcoming season would make a perfect backdrop to that too. And not to mention that owls are the most active in winter, so maybe the two villains that could come into this story could be a mix of the Court of Owls and Mr. Freeze. But again, I think leaving the owls until a final film would be more appropriate. But if the next film did take place in a wintry themed Gotham, it could tie into what we likely would see, which would be Robert Pattinson's Batman upgrading his Year 1 suit, Batmobile and equipment to fit the conditions. We can also see him eventually donning the cape and gliding over parts of the city, because that wingsuit in the first film, while beneficial to escape the GCPD, was something that I don't see staying around for much longer. He's going to upgrade all of this equipment at some point, and as his hero develops, the next film would be the perfect place to do so, especially if the conditions move from a rainy Gotham in the first one to a wintry themed Gotham in the second. It would only call for an upgraded set of tools. Don't forget, Reeves did include a wintry setting in his second Planet of the Apes film, and even had a lot of visual comparisons between the Batman and his film Let Me In from a colour palette and cinematography standpoint, so he does like to present some visual continuity across his work. But even if we don't get that wintry setting and villains that go along with that, I can still see the Caped Crusader upgrading his tools to fight whatever of the rogues gallery that stands in his way. It's key to note as well that Reeves recently said that the next film would most likely go beyond Year 2, so we could even see a few years pass between the ending of the first film and the start of the second. Either way, I'm sure things will get worse before they get better. And speaking of things getting worse, the comic No Man's Land would totally tie into the way the first film ended, and I can definitely see some inspiration being carried through to a sequel. Batman No Man's Land from 1999 was a story that introduced characters like Batgirl and was the inspiration for things we saw in The Dark Knight Rises, primarily focusing on a story about what happens to Gotham after the city was mostly destroyed by an earthquake. It led to an evacuation, and then we got No Man's Land. Bridges in Gotham were blown, and everyone who was left in the city were a part of an unprecedented warfare and crime. Now, while we got the Gotham floods in the first Batman film, and while the second film will probably not do the whole blowing of bridges thing we saw in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises, I think the inspiration here is the idea of Gotham becoming a complete war zone for the criminals that want to seize power. I honestly can see this being a huge part of the opening events in the Batman sequel, because the ending of the first film really does suggest that things are going to get worse before they get better, as Catwoman clearly outlines to Bruce in their final conversation. To the criminals, this will be an opportunity for a power grab that really challenges Batman more than he ever was expecting. Penguin would of course be a likely option when it comes to street crime, but if No Man's Land is a point of inspiration, it could get even deeper than that. In the comic, it becomes a fight between almost everyone, with even the GCPD having to become a gang to hold off the continuous wave of violence. I think when it comes to the aftermath and what was alluded to at the end, this will definitely be a source of the landscape of Gotham and what it's becoming, but the central story and villain is something that could be different within that. After all, the Batman took from various stories and wasn't just inspired by one, so I can see Reeves doing something like that in each of his next films. And speaking of another story that kind of reflects what was seen in No Man's Land, was that of Batman 0 Year, which comparatively began with the city almost destroyed in a massive flood. Of course, we got that at the end of the Batman, but moving forward it also tapped into Gotham becoming quite the dystopian landscape controlled by the Riddler. With Joker literally telling Riddler at the end of the first Batman film that this is an opportunity for a comeback story, who's to say that Reeves doesn't combine No Man's Land and 0 Year as 2 points of inspiration to set up a future film with the Riddler and Joker taking control of Gotham. It would all have to link into the progression of this story, but what we do know is that the Riddler and Joker are going to be a part of the future, and it would make sense if they came back to the city in a powerful way. 0 Year also dealt with the early years of Batman and him figuring out what it means to be a figure and symbol of hope that the city needs him to be. And of course, by the end of the film, he isn't quite there yet. So it seems Reeves is definitely keen on this story, as the end of the Batman very much hints at that being the motivation down the line, and having the comeback of the Riddler and Joker is something that is bound to happen. Barry Keoghan's proto-version of the Joker was mainly heard, and you could briefly see his permanent smile, and again, I think this is just planting the seed for something more down the line, and not necessarily for the sequel. But the idea of 0 Year's events is something that can be used around another villain, such as Mr. Freeze or someone else. And the same goes for Robin, who, if he is a part of Reeves' films, I can see that being much further in the future too. Heck, with all of these different things that I'd love to see, I wouldn't be surprised if Reeves did more than 3 Batman films, because there's so much storylines and characters that he could cover. But while I don't think we're going to see the Joker, Riddler's return, or Robin until at least the 3rd film, the villain that I do think could be a huge part of the sequel is actually the one I talked about in my biggest questions video the other day, and that is Hush. Now, while Matt Reeves has kind of moved around the question of Hush when he's been asked about him, he's never denied the possibility of seeing him, just like with Freeze and the other villains that he's brought up in interviews. But if there's one villain in a sequel that would perfectly build on some of the unanswered questions surrounding the history of Gotham and the Waynes in the first film, then Hush seems like a great one to tackle. We also haven't seen him in a modern live-action film, and having quite the new adversary makes it all the more interesting. Reeves could be building up to the villains we know, such as Joker, Bane, Mr. Freeze, more of the Riddler, and many more, but this could be the background to what becomes the foreground in the Batman 2 with someone like Hush. It could be the transition point of Gotham into that hellscape that No Man's Land and 0 Year taps into. Hush also eventually teams up with the Riddler to manipulate all of Gotham's underground into taking Batman down. And even in the film we've just seen, we do get the brief tease of Hush, where a reporter named Elliot was murdered and it had relations to Thomas Wayne. This is likely the father of Thomas Elliot, known as Hush, who in the comics was known as the childhood friend of Bruce. Obviously, there would have to be changes to this storyline, and maybe Hush would be more of a side villain that ultimately comes into the foreground, similar to Penguin in this first film, but all the links to the history of Gotham, the Waynes, and the murder of Elliot gives this storyline the potential to be very prominent if Reeves wants to go down that line. Or maybe it's just going to continuously act as an Easter egg for fans who know the character of Hush. I guess we can only wait and see, but it is interesting to think about if Reeves wants to build on the secrets and history of Gotham and really use that to propel the future of the city into question. What we do know about the sequel and whatever route Reeves wants to go in is that Robert Pattinson's Batman and Andy Serkis's Alfred will be back in the second film alongside that of James Gordon, who apparently now isn't getting the GCPD series that was originally planned. That show has now been replaced by an Arkham Asylum show, which could be setting up some of the villains we'll see in future films, or maybe we'll even get a lot more of the Riddler and Joker. There's also the Penguin HBO Max show, which will go deeper into Colin Farrell's Oz, and then there's still questions over whether Zoë Kravitz Selina Kyle will return after departing Gotham City for Bloodhaven. Maybe we'll get a Catwoman show that introduces that of Nightwing in the process, or maybe she'll be spending some time away from Gotham before she returns in a later film. Anything could really happen come the Batman 2, and I'm sure we'll get plenty of the infamous Rogues Gallery entering the frame and trying to seize Gotham after the events of the first film. Reeves has established his world in such a great way, and it opens the door for many of Batman's characters to be introduced in big and fitting ways. But that was my video discussing some of the things we could see in the Batman 2. The ending of this first film has opened up many possibilities for the second one, and honestly, Matt Reeves could go in any direction. It does seem that we are going to go even deeper into the history of the city and the Waynes, so I think that most of these storylines and characters that I've discussed are ones that could very well be tackled. Still, after this first film, I have faith in Reeves to construct a great story in the sequel, whatever elements he adapts, and it could turn out to be even better than the first one. But let me know down below in the comment section what you would like to see in a next Batman film, alongside what you thought of the ending to this first entry. For much more videos and news on the Batman, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.